and welcome to lesson 9 of our English unit for term 2. So if you remember yesterday, we looked at the 3 different types of sentences. We also looked at coordinating conjunctions and main and subordinate clauses. So if we do a quick recap, there were 3 sentence types. There was simple, compound and complex. And our coordinating conjunctions, we can remember them by the acronym FANBOYS. For, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. In today's lesson, we're going to take a closer look at main clauses and subordinate clauses. Okay, our learning intention today, I'm learning to understand the use and purpose of main clauses and subordinate clauses. And the success criteria, I'm successful when I can explain the difference between a main clause and a subordinate clause, and I can explain the purpose of a main clause and a subordinate clause. Let's start looking at the main clause. It expresses a complete thought, it contains a subject and a verb, and it makes sense by itself. Okay, so when we look at the simple sentence, remember a simple sentence contains one main clause and makes sense on its own. We've got here, the cane toad now survives in harsh climates. Okay, it contains a subject, which is cane toad, and it contains a verb, which is survives. Your task right now, I want you to have a read through of your feature article, which is the ruthless march of the toxic invader, and identify a main clause. You will need to pause the video. You will need to write your answers on your worksheet. I think I've also got in there, I want you to identify not only the main clause but the subject and the verb within that main clause. Once you've done that, I want you to come back and continue on with the lesson. Okay, moving on, let's have a look at the compound sentence. So remembering, a compound sentence contains two main clauses joined by a coordinating conjunction. Okay, in the compound sentence, the 2 main clauses make sense on their own. So let's have a look at this one. Toads are adapting to our environment, but the native ecosystem is adapting to the toads. Our main clause, our first main clause, toads are adapting to our environment. The conjunction is but, and the second main clause is the native ecosystem is adapting to the toads. Okay, we can see 2 main clauses and a conjunction. That's how we know this is a compound sentence. Okay, so we can see that both the main clauses, if said by themselves, make sense. So I could tell you that toads are adapting to our environment. And if I told you that, that would make sense to you. I could also say to you, the native ecosystem is adapting to the toads. If I just said that to you, that would make sense itself. Okay, so as we can see, those 2 main clauses, even when joined by a coordinating conjunction, still make sense on their own. Your task now is to pause the video, read your feature article and identify a compound sentence. Write the compound sentence on your worksheet and I want you to identify the 2 main clauses and write them on your worksheet as well. Once you've done that, come back, continue on with the lesson. Okay, so remembering the 3 rules of a main clause. It expresses a complete thought, it contains a subject and a verb, and it makes sense by itself. So moving on to complex sentences. So complex sentences, they contain a main clause and 1 or more subordinate clauses. So far we've been practicing finding the main clause. So let's have a look at the other part of the complex sentence, which is the subordinate clause. Okay, so a subordinate clause, it doesn't express a complete thought. It still contains a subject and a verb, but it does not make sense by itself. So if I came up to you and I said to you, because it evolved, does that make any sense to you? Of course it doesn't. But if we use that subordinate clause in our sentence, It provides us with more information. So let's have a look here. The sentence, the cane toad now survives in harsh climates. Okay, so we can see that this sentence tells us that the cane toads are now surviving in harsh climates. If we now add the subordinate clause to the sentence, the cane toad now survives in harsh climates because it has evolved, we can see that by adding that subordinate clause, we now not only know that the cane toad is surviving in these harsh climates, we also know why it is surviving in these harsh climates. So we've got our information, which is our main clause. We've added our subordinate clause on, and that subordinate clause has actually provided us with more information around our main clause. Okay, so remember the 3 rules of the subordinate clause. It doesn't express a complete thought, it contains a subject and a verb, and it doesn't make sense when you say it on its own. Okay, so let's have a look. The main clause versus the subordinate clause. So if you have a think about it, what is the same about main clauses and subordinate clauses, and what is different about main clauses and subordinate clauses? I want you to once again pause your worksheet, pause the video, go to your worksheet, answer the questions, come back once you've done that and continue on with the lesson. Okay, so let's have a go. Let's have a look through this one. So the same with both of these is that the main clause and the subordinate clause, they both contain a subject, they both contain a verb. What's different is the main clause makes sense on its own and the subordinate clause doesn't make sense on its own. And if we also think about it, we know that the main clause is also a complete thought, where the subordinate clause is not a complete thought. Okay, so that's the end of today's English lesson. So what I want you to do now, just as an extra task, is next time you're talking to a family member or a friend, you can just say some random subordinate clause to them. So you could say something like, because it jumped. Or you could say something like, because it hollered. Okay, and when they look at you like you're absolutely crazy and they ask you what you're talking about, you can say to them, I just told you a subordinate clause, and they can see how smart you are. Okay, well that's it for today's lesson. Let me know how you go with your subordinate clauses and tricking family members and friends. And make sure you jump online tomorrow for our final lesson for week 2. Okay, see ya. Have a great day.